Now we have a scrapper friend that you guys know. He hangs out my channel most of the time, running most of the raids with us at the same time too. We have Foss here.
안녕하세요. 저는 로스타크가 오픈 베타로 한국에 처음 나왔을 때부터
He played
첫날부터
Lostark since the open beta when it came out, and he still plays till now. And he's been playing Scrapper ever since. So after the open beta, about in the year, he had to go to the army. What you do is like a mandatory army service. What you do it for all Koreans. So he went to the army when the season 1 started. That's when the game was bad, as you guys may heard from Saint, right? The season 1 is when the director was really bad and was called Doomgangsan instead. So he was at an army at that time, the whole time. And when he came back, the game became real good. So he just kept playing. It's a clever timing.
네, 뭐 그러고 복귀해가지고 지금 계속 키우고 있고 결론적으로 지금 메인 캐릭터 6개로 5 scrapper and 1 artist, specialist.
So he came back, played ever since, and he has 5 scrappers and 1 artist. So again, having 1 support is pretty good on your 6 character roster.
인파이터 아무래도
So those of you who are wondering, oh, I thought he was your scrapper 1-trick friend. How come he doesn't have all scrappers? He has 6 scrappers. So one of the 6 characters he plays, he had all the characters at 1460, getting all the gold. And after when the news came out where you're limited to 6 characters making gold, he decided to throw away 1 scrapper and bring a 1 support in. Because again, as I said before, playing 1 support is pretty good. And the scrapper that he threw away is a shock scrapper. Okay, so that kind of explains the player itself as an intro. So what we're going to do now is we're going to talk about the class, the very beginning part of the class, like, you know, the beginning information, all that stuff. And later on, we're going to go to the next category.
다른 직업이랑 어느
So
정도
Scrapper, as he said in the very beginning, is a very close range class. He doesn't really have a mid-range attack skills, as in terms of playstyle.
보통 이제 직업각인 메이저
So as you guys know, you have different builds. Like you have the shock build and you have Taijutsu build, right? But comparing Scrapper to every other classes in Lostark, she is closer to doing consistent damage instead of burst.
뭐 기본적인 거 스펙에 관해서 캐릭터 스펙에 관해서
So for advantage of a Scrapper, in general, she is not like a master of like one category, but she's also like a jack of all trades, as we explained on the classes before. She is able to do everything that she can do as her class. Like she doesn't lack anything. It's more, you kind of code that into like it's a perfect hexagon class, but she is not excelling at something, as in like a DPS. If the ceiling of DPS is higher, staggers like super high, like destroyer, etc. All that stuff.
그게 제가 이 게임 처음
So what he said is when he started this game, he didn't know that he was gonna do a lot of party play. He chose a class that, oh, okay, I think this class is gonna be able to do everything that he wants to do in a solo play, so he chose that class, right? That's the mentality of him choosing the class, because it looked like it's fun, looked like it's going to not be reliant on anything else other than the like himself.
단점 근접 딜러라는 거 빼면은
The very simple disadvantage that when I asked him about disadvantages is he doesn't really feel that Scrapper doesn't really have a disadvantage, except the fact that he is melee, as in he needs to be melee classes tend to have a little bit of disadvantage compared to range because it's a little bit harder to do DPS in general. 됐어?
그리고 사실 스크래퍼의 진짜 아이덴티티.
So apparently that's the true identity for Scrappers. You get to dash twice.
그리고 이런 거는 이제 뭐 나중에 하지만 실전에서 이런 식으로도 써먹을 수 있어요. 패턴 피하고 한 대 때리고 패턴 한 번 더 피하고.
So for example, he can show it to you later on the playstyle review on detail. When you do more deep dive on the playstyle and stuff, you can dash once and use a skill and then dash again. So those kind of maneuvering plays is possible. Probably the only class that can do that too.
이런 게 이 스크래퍼 플레이를 굉장히 쉽게 만들어.
Since majority of the Scrapper skills are very easy to do, very fast animation. It's just that the only thing is just close range. It's a very fast animation. Everything is cancelable by spacebar, and you have 2 space bars, right? She's one of the best classes to utilize when you're doing a tri-party, if that makes any sense. Because when you do a tri-party, you don't know what the character is going to do. You don't know what the boss is going to do. You don't know any of the patterns. So playing a Scrapper on a very hard raid that you have never tried before, you're taking a class that's going to be the least punishing, and then you can actually use majority of your mechanical skills to actually clear the raid before playing any of the harder classes that are with less vitality or less maneuvering. Cool. Okay, so yeah, this covers the basic intro for it. So let's now go over more of a deep dive into going over skills. Okay. Apparently, he was making something like making a tutorial or something like that, but he says he's not done yet.
calculator
Calculator.
for your skill DPS. 인파이터 데미지 타입은
The reason why ambush master is very important because there's most of the skills the scrapper has back attacks,
except this.
except
Instant
your
hit.
counter skill. Yep.
인스턴트 hit.
Mhm.
기습 얘기가 저 계산에 왜 들어가냐면은 이제 제가 쓰는 트라이포드 중에 뭐 이건 제가 쓰는 건 아니지만 용의 강림에 있는 화신 출격 이런 거 보면은 몸 주위에 도는
So when you use Dragon Advent like that, so you see the fire aura around it. So some people use that tripod for additional tick damages that you do. So later on, when you have better engravings and more percentage on the back attacks, those tick damages tend to be more obsolete. It tends to be less important. So he was just calculating the general, like the play times of when certain tripods become more obsolete than what becomes more important later.
그래서 이런 계산들은
The reason why he making this calculator is just to make sure that which particular skills are providing more DPS based on time, but something like gems, something like specific tripods, etc., are not as calculated. So it could be a little bit weird. It could be a little harder or a little less miscalculated, but you know, it's just a general good sense, like which skills are more important and which skills should be like more like focused on. Before understanding this kind of thing, basically DPS is cooldown, the damage it does, and how many times it attacks in a certain animation frames, right? The efficiency comes from how often can you hit, how hard you hit, and how many times you hit during that animation. If you just calculate all that things together, you find a skill that just does most damage per time. It's very simple. It's a very simple calculation. And that's how people chooses which skill to use too.
저거 스킬 고르는 기준이
So before going over the scrapper video I made with him was the Q skill charging blow. What it did was it gave you attack power buff. The initial thing you needed to do was you use charging blow, get the attack buff, and then use your synergy skill, and then use your DPS skill for the maximum synergy plus buffs applied to it. And as you guys may know, when the PTR balance changes came out, which will be affected by you guys too, when when Valtan comes out with all the QL changes and the balance changes, the scrapper's playstyle changed a little bit, and it's actually more easier. Which is the W skill, your synergy skill, that gives you 6% more damage on your next other skills. So you just keep that synergy skill up, and then use everything else for just damage. That's it. It's just press buttons now, instead of making sure your charging blows there and making sure your synergy skills there, and then use your DPS skills. So it became a lot easier to do damage, even easier than before.
이거는 채술뿐만이 아니라 충격 단련도 쇼크 스크래퍼도 마찬가지. 같고.
So it's not only Taijutsu, but it's the same case for shock as well. Now going over how will you choose skills on your scrapper, like what justifies what class, what skills to take. Let's look at. So he's going to cover Taijutsu first on the skills section.
자 그러면은 이렇게
He's going to sort it based on if he's a Taijutsu scrapper. As you guys may know, if you have a Taijutsu engraving, it increases your light yellow skills damage, correct? You sort it by maximum amount of DPS you do while having level 3 Taijutsu engraving, because you're supposed to have that.
실제로 요거를
So this is the amount, this is the skills that he have assorted based on Taijutsu that is efficient in DPS. That chart over here, this chart.
스킬을 구성하는 데 있어서
Right, so reviewing over after the PTR change, you just need one synergy skill, because synergy skill is very important, right? Because it increases your damage for yourself and your party. And you fill up the rest of the skill bars with your DPS skills, the most efficient DPS skills. And at the same time, you can do all 7 DPS if you want to, but adding a counter in one of your skill bars is actually pretty important too, because counter tends to be a lot more important as more Legion raids come out in the future for you guys.
여기까지 기본적 여러 개 잡았으면은 자 시너지 스킬 3개 중에
Going over the synergy skill really quickly. You have 3 of them. You have Judgment, Fierce Tiger Strike, and Crushing Smite. The reason why you use Crushing Smite is it's a 3-hit skill. So on purpose, since it's skill level 4, the goal is not to do damage with Crushing Smite or synergy skills. The synergy skill's job is to make sure you have the synergy skill, so your other skills do more damage, correct? With Crushing Smite being the shortest in animation, by just pressing it once, prioritize that skill more. And I'm pretty sure other builds use that as well because it does make sense. Have a shorter animation and it does gets the job done. And the shorter it is, the more time you actually put in more DPS skills when the synergy cooldown is dropping.
자, 카운터를 보면은 이 두 개 중에 하나를 고르죠. 당연히 두 개밖에 없으니까.
So you have two
DPS
choices of counters.
DPS로 따지면은 인스턴트 히트가 가장 좋아요, 그냥.
So considering DPS, instant hit is the best.
근데 이제 라운드업 스위프에는 리셋 트라이포드가 있어요. 내가 적을 때렸을 때 확률로 이제 스킬이 리셋이 되는 거죠.
Right? The round up sweep has a tripod where it has a chance to reset. Before it used to reset when you crit, now it's not. Apparently it's 30% chance. Or if you level out the tripod, it has a chance to reset, but it's just a lower percentage.
그래서 허공에 썼을 때는 무조건 이렇게 쿨이 돌아가지만 적을 적중시켰을
Right.
때
So when you're actually fighting against the boss, not the scarecrow, since you're using the yellow skill majority of the time, your shock gauge is going to fill up. So when your shock gauge is filled up to a certain point, use your death rattle because death rattle is based on the DPS is based on how much shock gauge you have. And when that death rattle is on cooldown, you can use roundup sweep to hope that it resets and then utilize your shock gauge a little more to efficiently use both of the meters, right? Your roundup sweep tends to reset a lot more. It can be a little higher in DPS, but in general, the instant hit should be a little higher, not considering it resets all the time.
플러스로 이제 이런 식으로
Also, if you use a roundup sweep, if you have a very high swiftness for Scrapper, you tend to run out of the yellow meter, which is your spirit meter, because your skills cooldown come out much faster. To balance that out, you take some of the green skills to wait until your spirit recovers a little bit.
여기서 이거 두 개의 효율성 차이가 있거든요.
Roundup sweep requires 2 tripods that semi-leveled. Oh yeah, so you level up 3 tripods in total. Instant hit is just 1 tripod, so there's efficiency there too. He wanted, so tripod leveling tripods is important too because what happens is you have limited number of tripods you can level because you have 6 gears and 3 each, so 18 tripods total. If you try to get to 18 if you try to level all 18 tripods, it's a lot of RNG too. So he just wanted to add that on top of it. So if you tend to go for Taijutsu Scrapper, you usually don't go roundup sweep because roundup sweep is going to be weaker, generally weaker, because you won't be able to level up all the tripods because you will focus on tripods on the other yellow skills as well. So generally, versus instant hit versus roundup sweep, instant hit is a little bit better because it's with less resources you spend, the more damage you can actually have an output.
그러면은 여기까지 했으면 됐고 나머지는 이제 그냥 DPS 순서대로 스킬만 고르면 돼요.
And afterwards, those two are the more important things. So we went over their synergy skill. You have a choice between 3. You have a choice between 2 for the counter skills. And then you just allocate all the DPS skills based on how high it is. So it seems like it's Battling Fist, Iron Cannon Blow, Charging Blow. There's Continuous Poison, Earthquake Chain, Dragon Abbot, etc.
그러면 이제 실제로 이 스킬 트리를 짜는데 어떤 점이 고려됐느냐를 얘기를 할게요.
Now he's going to tell you guys how he has chosen his main DPS skills. So if you look at Battling Fist, it seems to be the highest DPS skill, but
네, 여기에는 함정이 있는 게 이 친구 DPS 지금
so it's a little higher because what happens is you have, based on what kind of tripod you take as well. So if you look at here, oh, so that's including bleed damage. Oh, and that's a chance too. You have a chance to bleed. Okay. As you say, if you use this skill, the animation's a little longer. It hits you a lot too. It hits a lot too.
이 모든 타격에 이 50% 확률이 적용은 되거든요.
아, 그래?
네.
So
그러면은
every single hit, you have a chance to bleed at 50%. So all the hits that you do. I thought it was just like using once. So you have a chance to stack up to 3 times if you use the skill.
오 방금
But it
봤어요.
seems like you got one stack. That's it.
방금 1스택인 거 봤어요? 그렇게 많이 때렸는데.
Yeah, he hit so many times with that 50%. He just happened to land 1 stack on the bleed. So that's 2 stacks. Yeah, so it's random. So you have some of that RNG there. So what's that important over there is that 16% increase in efficiency is based on RNG, as in if you get the 3 stacks every single time.
저 출혈 데미지 이거는 스킬마다 다 달라요.
So for bleed as well, the damage gem does get applied on the bleed damage as well. However, Master of Ambush does not apply because it's not a back attack. Right, so if we put that into calculation, what happens is if you take Master of Ambush instead, Battling Fist with the bleed does not apply on the bleed damage. So that minus 16 damage is going to be applied to 76, so it's going to be 60, right? So this would be going down in the ranking. So the battling fist, the regular battling fist is 68, will be going up.
이 친구는 약간 운에 의지한 그리고 보석이랑 보석은 상관없죠. 기습의 대가가 안
He
들어.
uses that particular tripod for just a general flat DPS increase instead of using the bleed for RNG. And as he explained before, if you're using the bleed tripod, if you don't use Master of Ambush, the bleed may be a little bit better, adding the RNG in. But if you use Master of Ambush, since the bleed doesn't impact the DPS, the first tripod is better. So it's always based on situations and always based on whichever build you have. And then you have the battling, you have the Iron Cannonball, which is high DPS, and then Charging Blow, it changed into, so the buff tripod disappeared, and it turned into just increased flat damage. So most people have this already at level 5, so it really didn't change anything. So it just does more damage. You just do more damage instead of providing buffs.
일단 컨티뉴어스 푸시에 대해서는 좀 이따 얘기하고 그래서 하나, 둘, 셋, 6개의 스킬을 쓰게 될 거예요.
So you
Iron
have
Cannon
6
Blow,
skills: Iron Cannon Blow, Battling Fist, Charging Blow,
Earthquake Chain,
Chain,
Dragon Advent,
Dragon Advent, and Death Rattle as your main skills. And since one's synergy and one's counter, you have all 8 skills.
자 그러면 여기서 컨티뉴어스 푸시는 왜 무시하죠?
So he's saying that you may be wondering why we're not taking continuous push, because continuous push tends to be pretty high in DPS. So if you guys are wondering.
실전 레이드에서 얘가 이게 가장 데미지 기대값이 높은 트라이포드예요, 맞지?
So in an actual raid, so this has the highest expected DPS, the skill itself.
저거를 보통 저렇게 지금 AK에 들어가 있죠, 컨티뉴어스 푸시가. 이런 식으로 하루 종일 놀리고 있다가
So you're cycling your skills.
다른 스킬들이 모두 쿨다운일 때 이런 식으로 돌리는 식으로 쓰거든요.
Oh, so when everything is in cooldown, you use that skill to just
보시면은
wait for the cooldown.
보시면은 밀고 나가기 한 여기까지 한 3분의 2까지 왔는데 이미 다른 스킬들은 다 쿨타임이 돌아와 있어요. 보시면 그죠?
And the problem is when you're almost done with the skill itself, all your skills are back to cooldown anyways.
다시 보여드릴게요, 그냥.
Yeah, so he's gonna show it to you again.
거기에 한번 집중을 해보세요.
Right. So
cooldown이야?
focus
돌려.
over here on the cooldown. So he's almost done, but the charging blow is back, the synergy is back, and the other DPS skills are back too.
방금은 이제 밀고 나가기가 끝날 때까지 다른 스킬.
So when you're actually fighting a moving boss, right, like Guardian or a Legion raid, right? Most of your, so this is a general rule of thumb. Your skill shouldn't be like ready, as in it's like it shouldn't be off cooldown. You should use most of your skills majority of the time, because the skills that you don't use, you do less DPS, and this stacks up. Like you lack DPS because you can't use more skills, you know.
그래서 밀고 나가기를 쓰는 와중에 그 이 긴 그냥 시전 시간을 빼버리고 이 시간에 그냥 다른 스킬들을 쓰는 게 DPS적으로는 낫다. 근데 이거를 쓰는 것도 추천해요. 재밌잖아 이거.
So instead of just using that one skill, you're better off just cycling other skills together. But he said you use it because it's fun. I mean, you look like a troll, dude. What are you doing, dude? Okay, good.
Anyways.
But you guys know the reason why you don't use a certain skills, or you use a certain skill if you want to. So it's not a bad skill it's not a bad DPS skill. It's just different choices. You have different choices. Because fun is the most important thing.
아까 여기까지는 다 얘기를 했는데 지진세요.
Let's also talk about Earthquake Chain and Dragon Advent, because they have two different styles too.
지진세가
There's 2 tripod choices for Earthquake Chain, and the second one you have choice between Blindside and Power Strike.
그래서 이거를
But most people use Blindside because
무슨 차이냐? 기습
so I'm
강타는
just going to show you the difference.
기습 강타는 그냥 원탭
Yep, it's
끝.
just one tap. Yep.
끝. 간격은
But Power Strike does what?
이제 콤보 스킬로 바뀌면서 한 번 더 누를 수 있어요.
Oh, and it turns into a combo skill.
동작도 바뀌고 그러니까 좀 더 오래 걸리죠.
So there's no big difference other than the animation difference. But people tend to use Blindside because it's shorter. It's easier to press it once, because sometimes combo skills you kind of forget to press the button twice. I forget to press the button twice as well. So if you are, uncomfortable with that, people tend to use the blind side more.
그런데 제가 트라이포드를 이렇게 찍은 이유는 계산상으로 그냥 이게 더 셉니다. 여기까지만 설명을 할게요.
But power strike, the pure damage number itself, the power strike is higher.
용의 강림 같은 경우는 트라이포드 선택지가
And for Dragon Abbot, you have different choices. You have right, so you have these two choices as well. You have tenacity and conflagration attack.
무조건 DPS만 생각하면은 화신 출격을 찍는 게 맞지만 강인함 스킬을
So his point for the two tripod choices is, which you guys have to make your own decision, is you just want more DPS, you can have the conflagration attack because it's going to just do more DPS. However, the thought of taking tenacity is when you have tenacity, so you're okay, super armor? Oh, so you're in super armor when you use this, right? So you get to be in an advantageous position if you're in super armor. For example, if other classes, let's say Valtan does a huge axe swing, right? Other classes are going to run away. However, if you have a tenacity, and let's say a support gives you a shield, but it also looks like you have a shield rune on the Dragon Abbot as well. So if you have a shield, you can jump in and do additional damage when other classes can't. What does that mean? You will do more DPS at that specific time. So if you want to play that kind of style and have more skills that are in your arsenal based on like how you're going to be doing DPS, like the comfort of yourself on the playstyle, you would take that. But I'm just gonna dodge it and just do more damage with my just do more damage, and you take the second tripod. Right. So also notice if you use the Dragon Abbot with the conflagration attack, right? You get an aura beside you, the flame aura beside you. So you will need to be close to the boss anyway to land the full 6 ticks to do the most damage, right? So you just have a choice. Oh, it's like, I'm gonna be close to the boss anyways with the Dragon Abbot, so I'm gonna be okay with that. So you can take it accordingly if you want to. But you go, I kind of want super armor. I like super armor. I want to be more careful when I'm doing the fight. I'm gonna take tenacity. As you may know, what is important here is what we learned is it has to be based on preference. There's no right answer. If it has to be based on preference, and you guys have to make a decision based on what you are trying to achieve within the skill.
해술의 기본적인 설명은 여기까지가 끝이고요. 저거 쇼크 스크래퍼는 훨씬 간단합니다.
So he's going to over the shock skills really quickly. So instead of going over 2 separate builds separately, we're just gonna go over both of them at once. See if it a little bit better, or see if it's like a little bit different. So we're going to go over the shock skills a little bit as well.
쇼크 스킬을 구성하는 거는 어떻게 구성이
So
되죠?
choosing shock skills is a lot more easier than Taijutsu, because as you may know, what shock skills importance is, you gotta fill up that gauge on the right. And in order for you to fill up the gauge on the right, you need the yellow skills to fill it up. So what you do is you take 3 skills that fills up your shock, which is usually the charging blow, your synergy skill, right? Your synergy skill, both builds use it because it's your synergy skill. It's important. And then you also have the tiger blow too, the fierce tiger strike, because it also fills up a lot of your shock gauge. So your yellow skill's purpose is to fill up your shock gauge, and when your shock gauge is filled up, you use your green skills. Right. So if you get the shock training engraving, you automatically fill up your shock gauge. That's what the engraving does. Right. So as you notice here, when you use your yellow skills, your green gauge fills up. If you use your green skills, your yellow skills fill up. So it's balancing between these two gauges the most important when you're playing Shock Scrapper. So basically, you do your synergy skill, and then you fill up your gauge with the yellow skills more, and then you use your green skills to do damage. So when you're building a build, like this is about it, because it's very simple. For Shock Scrapper, again, you just choose the 5 skills based on the pure DPS, and Death Rattle does the most damage. That thing is a monster. The skill Death Rattle. You just need to make sure that you have your shock gauge at full, 76 to 100%, which is about here.
이게 0 to 100거든요.
Yeah, so that's 0 to 100%. Your Death Rattle requires you to have a lot of shock in order for you to do maximum damage.
여기가 50, 여기가 75.
That's 50.
그래서
That's around 75. So as long as it's above that point, you will do max damage.
요 선만 살짝만 넘기면 된다.
As long as you're a little bit over there, you'll do max damage. There's a lot of people who don't do that. And if you happen to play Shock Scrapper, using Death Rattle at 76 to 100% shock meter is very, very important. You're losing so much DPS opportunity.
이게 100% 데미지일 때는 크리 터지면 크리 안 터지네요.
No
다시.
crit. No crit.
This is why I'm not playing Shock Scrappers. Shock is good, but nice. 2,400만.
24 million. No
다시.
crit. No crit. This is why you play
1,900만.
19 million. So you're missing 5 million. That's big. That's huge, guys. That's huge.
Cool.
So I think this covers most of like your skill choices, because skill choices are very important, because that's what is based off of what kind of play styles you're going to achieve and all these things. So we're going to go over a little bit more on the skill section of, like, you know, if there's anything else to share.
자, 찰징 블로우 중요한 DPS, 채술한테 중요한 DPS 스킬이고, 쇼크 스크래퍼한테는 이제 트포, 요거 트포 찍어가지고 이제 충격 수급하는데 중요한 역할이고, 넘길게요 간단하게. 시너지 스킬, 그다음에 이동기 겸 저는 이제 피격이상 슈퍼 아머로 쓰고 있고,
Super armor skill over there.
DPS 스킬이고, 카운터 겸 DPS 겸 채술용, 그다음에 DPS용. DPS는 좋지만 실전에서 너무 이제 쓰는데 오래 걸리기 때문에 안 쓴다. DPS, 그다음에 Trash, Synergy, Counter, and DPS for Shock.
그러면 심판, so judgment, is there a little bit difference on not using judgment? So the reason why he doesn't use judgment, because you have judgment as a synergy skill option as well, right? He doesn't use it because the animation is bad, as we went over in the synergy skill section as well.
제가 쓰는 파쇄의 강타 짧죠? 그리고 심지어
So if you use W and then use your other skill immediately, it just smoothly connects.
근데 맹호격도 사실 여기까지도 괜찮아요. 이제 모션이 약간 올려치는 동작 때문에 후 딜레이가 좀 있어 보여서 그렇지 여기까지도 괜찮아요. 나쁘지 않아요.
And Tiger Strike is also fine too. But Judgment, you have to jump. So you're kind of animation locked.
그러니까 이게 실제로 시간을 쟀을 때는
The
불편하다.
actual frame difference is not that much, but if you actually in a tight spot and doing a raid, you're like focused and stuff, you may see a little bit of difference. You may feel a little bit of clunkiness if you use Judgment instead of the Crushing Smite. When he did the calculation for DPS, Judgment seems to be very low. That's why he doesn't really use it anymore.
그래서 DPS 얘가 인파이터 스킬 중에 제일 센 스킬이에요.
The Death Rattle is the #1 most damaging skill.
각인이 없을 때.
Without any engravings.
클래스 인그레이빙.
With no engravings.
그다음에 여기 설명했고 여기 설명했고 이거 트래쉬.
Trash. 회심매일교.
회심일격으로 설명을 안 했는데 얘도 이제 설명 바리에이션인데.
So he's gonna explain about critical blow. It's like a variation.
어느 자리든 괜찮은데 저는 보통 바꿀 때 여기다 넣거든요. 왜냐면은 연안파신.
So if you see the A skill, the change destruction fist, it's a long animation.
그래서 만약에 이제 요거를 쓰게 된다면은 요 자리에 보통 바꿔서 쓰는 편인데 얘를 왜 쓰냐?
You would usually switch over change destruction fist into the critical blow.
그리고 얘는 기본적으로 차지 스킬인데.
It's a charge skill. Okay. So you usually use mastery, quick prep, and tendon rapture.
그러면은 스킬이 어떻게 바뀌냐? 차지가 사라지고 그냥 나간다.
And the charge disappears, and then it just becomes like a shorter animation.
근데 뭐 DPS적으로 얘가 그렇게 막 엄청 뛰어난 스킬은 아닌데 왜 쓰냐? 요 데미지 포기하고 요 트라이포드를 찍으면은 이게 디스트로이어.
So if you look at here, if you take the target focus tripod instead for getting the damage, because it's the purpose of this skill is like it's a little bit less damage anyway. So you take the synergy skill for 6 seconds, you do 20% more staggered damage for the party and yourself. You have that big X mark. Artillers have it and destroyers have it also. Yep.
그래서 만약에 이제 파티 무력화가 부족한데
So if your party is lacking stagger a little bit, and that will happen to you guys sometimes. As a scrapper, you can actually take that tripod and maybe help out on a little bit more on this stagger section for yourself and your party too.
여기까지고 그다음에 뭐 각성기 궁금하신 분 있을까봐 얘기를 하자면은
Oh, let's talk about the awakening a little bit. The first one, very cool.
렉 걸렸다 다시.
Oh, lag.
Okay, it's not live. That's okay. 지금 인파이터들은 다 각성기를 이거를 써요.
But he uses
왜냐?
the big fist one. Why? Everyone uses this skill.
지금 극멸 거는
The farther away you are, the less damage you do with that awakening. So about there, the second awakening does more damage. About that position, because it's based on distance. But if you go
얘는 그냥-
further, it does more
이거는-
damage. Yeah.
이거는 RNG. 얘도 든 듯.
And since scrappers are close range all the time, the second awakening tends to be better because you're always in close range.
뭐 각성기도 이게 끝입니다. 이거밖에 없어요. 그냥 볼 데미지라서 그냥 다.
So that covers. I think that covers most of the skills. So now let's go over. Let's go over the runes and gems real quick, because we haven't been going over that category for most of my videos plus the interviews. So let's go over the gems and runes really quickly, and like rune choices and gem choices based on what skills that he has take for both builds. So we're going to talk about the runes and gems for Taijutsu first and then shock. Yeah, so if you play the game long enough, you'll have a bunch of runes. You'll have a bunch of runes stacking up. Oh, the
쓸모가
runes that you can't use is wealth rune.
이거 못 쓰는 거. 그래서
You can't use it.
왜 못 쓰냐면은 이 얘네는 퍼센트로 늘려주는데
It's a flat number instead of so the percentage doesn't really matter.
그래서 웰스룬이 별로 소용이 없다.
Yep, doesn't even work. The runes doesn't even work on Scrapper. No need to farm that wealth rune for him, guys.
나이스.
Right, in Iron Wall, no one uses this shitty ass rune.
나머지 룬들은 이제 다 쓸 수 있어요.
Everything else you can use the rune.
선택지가 되게 많아요. 일단 광분룬 되게 좋거든요.
Rage rune is very good. On skill something like you use very often, your synergy skill and your charging blow too.
아무튼 이런 식으로 여러 번 누르는 스킬이나 아니면 그냥 이제 전진 일격에 넣어도 상관없고요. 한 번 누르는 스킬이지만 자주 쓰니까. 전진 일격이 뭐 보석 지금 안 꼈지만 보석을 안 껴도 쿨타임이 굉장히 짧다.
So without gems, your charging blow is a very short cooldown skill. So you can keep using it, and if rage happens to pop, it's good for you too. More damage.
광분은 이런 식으로 사실 어디에 넣어도
So
상관없어요.
he recommends rage runes on crushing blow or charging blow.
희귀
Not going over the Galewind rune.
내가 좀 느리다 생각하는 주력기는 그냥
Yeah, so Galewind rune is more of a universal rune because it just increases your speed. So it just increases your animation as well. So you kind of put it on a skill that you think it's clunky. That's it. You guys don't have the legendary Galewind rune yet, but when you guys fight Descaluda, he will drop legendary Galewind rune if you're lucky.
인파이터한테 룬을 어디다 박느냐 하는 건
Exactly. So as he said again, to clarify, the Galewind rune itself is very preference based. So if you think crushing blows, I think it's a little slow, or if you think dragon advent slow, I think that's slow. If you think your main DPS skill like iron cannonball is a little bit slower, you just put the Galewind rune based on your preference. Like it doesn't matter which one you put in. Everyone puts it a little bit differently. And also focus, you don't use. He forgot to mention focus rune because you don't use them either because they don't use mana.
그리고 단죄의 심판. 단죄의 심판은 이제
Conviction judgment.
컨빅션 저지먼트죠.
Correct. So those of you guys don't know conviction judgment rune yet, which you guys ask me sometimes, is you put this is a double rune. This is a double rune for you have to use it on two skills. First, you pop conviction. You'll see like a hourglass thing called conviction here. You have 2 seconds to use your judgment skill to pop that again. And it's about 40% chance on each skill. So if you use it on the multi-hit skill, you have a higher chance to pop that buff. So if you happen to successfully pop the judgment buff, you get increase in resources gain, and you have 15% additional cooldown. It used to be additive, now it's multiplicative though. It got nerfed a little bit. The cooldown portion is nerfed, but the resource gain is really important. So that rune RNG, he's not popping right now. So there you go. You have 2 seconds. And then now he activates it for 5 seconds. Now he has additional resource gain, right? And he has additional cooldown on top of that.
쿨다운은 얘기 안 해도 되는데 이거 인파이터한테 전투 자원 회복량은 어떤 식으로 작용하느냐 뭐 이것만 얘기하고 넘어갈게요.
So as you notice here, if you have high swiftness, you run out of spirit here, right?
Yep.
If you pop conviction and judgment, if you proc it, what happens is you gain double the spirit. As you notice, he's lacking spirit right now, right? But as soon as he pops the conviction judgment, he gets a double recovery for 5 seconds. What does that mean? He can go back to having full spirit. Yep, there you go. So he's going to have a full spirit now. He can actually rotate all the skills for 5 seconds. That's why some people use it. It's for the resource gains.
그래서 요거는 써도 되고 안 써도 된다.
So some people do use it if they think they lack a lot of spirit by going high swiftness, but it's also a preference. This is a preference area, guys. It's not like and nothing is mandatory here. It's always based on your playstyle, and if you want to adjust your playstyle accordingly, you should use it accordingly to help you out, to help your playstyle out. And overwhelm, obviously, on the higher, high stagger skills. Right, so it doesn't matter where you put overwhelming because majority of the scrapper skill all have medium-ish stagger, and which he also mentioned that the instant hit doesn't mention that there's a stagger, but apparently there is a pretty decent stagger on that. The game actually has a poor way of explaining which skill does which amount of stagger, and I'm pretty sure they'll maybe change it soon in the future. Because some skill doesn't say that it has stagger, but it actually does have stagger. But for a scrapper, it sounds like the instant hit doesn't say that it has stagger, but apparently it does.
수호룬 이제 아까
So going over protection again. Protection gives you a shield when you use a skill. If you are willing to use a certain skill and take the hit along with it, just like that Dragon Advent with the Tenacity tripod, right? Maybe picking a protection rune for your Dragon Advent is a good choice because you're going to take the hit anyway, so might as well have the shield up as well.
이거는
So
이제
that is the
전설
thought
룬이긴
process on
하지만
that.
보면은 쉴드량이 꽤 되죠.
So it's a decent amount of shield. It's not small either. It's more of a that you can take tick hits for sure from the bosses.
이제 조금 작은 보라색 수호 친구들은 조금 작긴 한데 그래도 여전히 괜찮아요. 이 정도.
Yeah, the purple ones are pretty good too. It's not as bad as you think. So bleed rune, as long as you have bleed rune on a skill that's less than 6 seconds, because bleed lasts 6 seconds, right? It is a very efficient rune. And at the same time, something like Soul Fist, when you guys do an energy release, the bleed damage actually goes up. If you actually use energy release. So let's say bleed is stacked up here, and then you use energy release to increase your attack power, the bleed damage goes up like mid ticks. So 3 ticks and then you use energy, the other 3 ticks has higher DPS. That's how the calculation works for this game.
근데 스크래퍼는 최근까지는 그래도 어느 정도 있었어요. 왜냐면은 차징 블로우를 썼을 때 공격력이 증가하는 효과가 있었으니까.
Right. So Scrapper was also had that same thing because Scrappers used to get attack power with the charging blow, right? But she doesn't have it anymore.
그래서 이제는 사실 별로 상관이 없는 얘기가 됐다. 출혈은
So for bleed, you can put it in if you want to increase just a little bit more DPS, but it is not as efficient anymore after the PTR change.
사실 그 전에도 그렇게 막 엄청 세진 않았어요. 아무튼 그거고 지금 전설에 없는데 속행도 중요해. 최근 메타에서 속행이 좀 주목을 많이 받고 있거든요.
So in the current meta, quick recharge is getting a little bit of attention right now. What quick recharge does is if you use a skill, you have a chance to lower the other skill's cooldown. Does that make sense? So if you have a class that repeats a lot of synergy skills, etc., it's not a bad idea to use it because the legendary quick recharge decreases by 16%. So that's like another whole second that you can get the skill. Oh, so it popped, right?
방금 한번 터졌어. 용광 한 1초 좀 안 되게 줄어들었죠?
Yeah, so it decreased about like a second more. Yeah?
그렇게 안 터지네. 아무튼 보여주진 못했지만 터진다.
But it didn't have a good example, but some people do use it when you really don't have much of a rune choice, that's what people usually use. Just put a quick recharge, and hopefully the other skills come back cooldown just a little bit faster. As for runes, it's the exact same thing for shock scrapper. It's very preference based, as we just talked about majority of the runes.
똑같이 생각하면 돼요. DPS 뭐 쇼크는 좀 느리니까 질풍 같은 거 좀 많이 받고 필요 없는 눈들 다 쳐내고 단죄 심판 쓸 수 있고 뭐 이런 거. 압도룬 박아도 되고. 그다음에 아까 쇼크 스크래퍼 스킬 중에 오래 걸리고
For example, the longer animation skills for
DPS는 좋지만.
shock. So if you add in protection rune for chain destruction fist, since you have instead of Gilwin, right? You're stuck in animation cancel, right? And since you're using the skill, and during your animation you have that shield, right? So you're generally safer. Does that make sense, guys?
질풍을
So
다 박을 수 있으면 좋은데 질풍을 아마 다 못 박을 거예요. 그래서 이런 식으로 써도 나쁘지 않다.
So since you won't be able to have all Gilwins in every single skill, instead of putting like a green Gilwin, right? Why not put a protection rune so that when you use a long animation skill, you get hit less damage. So that increases your survivability as well. So other classes, this doesn't apply to other classes. The reason why this option is possible for Scrapper is because Scrapper has a very high vitality point, right? It's rank 3 in default. So since she's very tanky to begin with, having a shield is very optimal, as in it's very efficient, because she takes less damage compared to other classes. So if you just have the shield, it's very good. It increases your survivability as well. So that's why he's recommending something like a protection rune instead of Gilwin if you run out of spaces. If you don't have anything else to put in, that is. Okay, so the runes are done. Let's go over the gems then. Okay, so best way to filter out this is pretty much same for every single class, guys. Your synergy skill doesn't need cooldown gem. Why? Because your synergy lasts 8 seconds and your skill cooldown is 6 seconds. Why would you use a cooldown gem, right? Because you have the synergy up 100% of the time as the default on the skill. So he's going to take out the skill to simplify on the teaching.
다음에 홍연 뺍니다. 홍연 빼고
It's gonna take out all the cooldown gems. Wow, so he uses seven damage gems now. Scrappers use 7 damage gems after PTR after balance change.
네, 이거는
Makes
이제
sense.
좀 바꿀 수 있습니다. 왜냐면은 예를 들어 순간 타격 딜보석을 하나 빼고 다른 스킬 쿨다운 잼을 하나 더 넣을 수가 있거든요. 보시면은
It's different per person. You can go 6 damage and then 5 cooldown if you want to.
제 추천에서는 왜 이렇게 박았느냐 그냥 그거를 설명할게요. 그러면은 자기 거 빌드업 할 때도 똑같이 적용할
Right.
수 있으니까.
So he's going to give you his thought process on the gems so that you guys have a good reference point and then you can adjust accordingly based on your preferences.
저는 그러니까 모든 레벨 보석의 레벨이 똑같으면 사실 이런 걸 걱정할 필요가 없는데
Since he has 1 level 10 and then 6 level 9s, they're not balanced, right? Because most of the time, a full level 9 gem is actually okay to have to the latest content. But since it's unbalanced, he has 1 level 10 and then 6 level 9s. What he does is he transferred that level 10 gem into the skill that he does most damage with, obviously, right?
for DPS, only DPS. DPS만 따져가지고.
Because Iron Cannon Blow does the most damage for a Scrapper.
Battering Fist,
Battering
Okay.
Fist,
Charging Blow,
Charging Blow,
Dragon Advent,
Dragon
Earthquake
Advent,
Chain,
Earthquake Chain,
그다음에 하위권 친구들, Death Rattle,
and the lower tier DPSs.
그다음에
The
Instant
Death
Hit,
Rattle and Instant Hit. Because he uses
Instant
Instant Hit for counter.
그다음에 쿨타임 감소는 이거는 그러니까 DPS로 따지면은 용의 강림.
So what happens is it's important for you to balance out the cooldown. For example, if one of your skill, which is Charging Blow, is too short on cooldown, during animation you're wasting time because you're pressing that button more, and the more times you press it, you're more animation locked. Therefore, you will not be able to use other skills to make it more efficient.
아까 막 차트 보여주면서 했던 그런 계산에서는 당연히
So sometimes since in the spreadsheet, putting cooldown gem on Charging Blow does increase your damage the most. Usually on a live fight instead of scarecrow fight, boss tends to move a lot too, right? It's smarter to utilize other skills and match the cooldowns to other skills too. Because again, Charging Blow's cooldown is fast already.
다시 제일 센 스킬 아이런 캐논 피스트, 베더링 피스트, 그 다음으로 센 스킬 드래곤 어드벤트, 얼스퀘이크 체인.
So
여기까지가
you
이거고.
based on the cooldown on the skills that does the most damage in ranking. If you tend to not use instant hit, you take out the damage gem for instant hit, and then take another cooldown gem for like maybe a death rattle or charging blow. So that's more of a preference. This is why the gem should be chosen by preference. There's no right answer. There's a right way to get to the right answer because his thought process is, okay, so the cooldown of a certain skill is too short, so I'm gonna lower the other one so that I can have a more smooth play on rotating all my skills, right? And at the same time, if you don't, let's say, oh, I like the roundup sweep counter. Let's say you like the roundup sweep counter. You like using it. If you're using that, okay, so where am I gonna get more cooldown from somewhere else? I'm just gonna have a shorter death rattle because I like using death rattle as well. But that process is the most important instead of copying directly from someone else. You have to choose it yourself. You have to test it out and then do it yourself. Cool.
그러면은 쇼크 스크래퍼로 넘어가서.
So the guy that's thrown away. Fast 5, the shock scrapper. He doesn't play shock scrapper anymore. The thrown away kid.
My God.
The kid that's unloved.
I'm sorry, Fast 5.
Fast 5 thrown away.
I'm sorry.
Fast 5 Lopang slave. So shock is actually even more simpler.
이거 쇼크 스크래퍼 할 때는 어느 정도 정답이 다 정해져 있습니다.
Shock scrapper is a little bit more simpler in choosing gems compared to taijutsu. It's like it's pretty set in stone, and the reason why is starting with death rattle, it does the most damage, right? And obviously you would put the highest level damage gem on death rattle. Damage gem on rest of the DPS skills, so it's 5.
Yeah, so you have 5 now, and cooldown for DPS skill.
Yup, cooldown for DPS skills.
그러니까 데미지는 이게 더 세요. 근데 리셋 트라이포드가 있기 때문에 리셋 트라이포드로 그걸 노려서 얘는 쿨다운 보석을 안 박습니다.
Right. So since roundup sweep has a reset tripod, you usually don't put in a cooldown gem because you're going for that resets. But however, you can switch up your tripods to have no resets and put a cooldown gem on it. But I don't think I would do that. I like the RNG. Right. So after putting the main DPS skills into cooldown gems, except the roundup sweep, you put the cooldown gem on any of the yellow skills that you like to use, which is mostly charging blow and crushing smite, or charging blow and tiger strike.
That's it. 이게 답니다.
Yeah, that's it. Cool. We went pretty deep dive on the skills, huh? Now let's go over. So what we're going to go over now is we're going to go over the combat stats and engravings pretty quickly.
일단은 쇼크 스크래퍼부터.
Alright, let's go over the shock scrapper first for engravings.
이거 정확한 수치는 아닌데 특화 수치 17.476당 데미지 충격 스킬의 데미지가 1%가 올라요.
There's a chart in the Korean community that every 17.6 spec you increase 1% damage.
지금 충격 스킬의 피해량, 쇼크 스킬의 피해 데미지가 0.97% 증가해죠. 0.97.
0.97%.
특화 수치를 마구 올려버리고 그러면은 충격 스킬의 피해량이 무려 103%, 2배가 된다.
So if you get to have 1800 spec, which is mostly the max amount that you get for most of the Korean patch right now, you get about 103% more damage on your shock skills. And rest you put on crit because you need the crit rate as well. So you can move around since you'll feel super clunky. People tend to put on swiftness as well, but if you do, you're going to be seeing a lot of white numbers. So theoretically, right? High spec and then just crit on necklace is the right way to build it. But if you tend to see a lot of white numbers, you want to see more yellows, you want to crit more. Moving a ring over to crit is not going to jeopardize your overall DPS because going from 1500 to 1800 to 1500 isn't as big as you think. Personal recommendation would be, well, obviously if you have every single accessories as spec, maybe one ring or two rings or even one earring could work. But two rings is where you're kind of pushing it for less damage. So you balance it off of whichever your preference is.
그러니까 충단이 간단해요. 되게 간단하죠.
It's very simple. Shock Scrapper combat stats is very simple.
자 그러면은 태술 타이주츠로 넘어가서
So if you talk about
타이주츠는
Taijutsu,
두 가지 스탯만 씁니다. 치명과 신속.
so Taijutsu uses two stats, crit and swiftness. Taijutsu Scrapper's ratio of combat stats is preference. There's a lot more opinions of how much ratio you should bring on the combat stats. So since there are so many opinions about certain builds, and certain builds have advantage and disadvantage, what Foss is saying, he's going to just tell you what his preference is, and what he prefers is high crit.
그러면은 하이크릿을 추천하는 이유는 뭐예요?
So for crit, it's very simple. As you guys may know, who played MMOs and all that stuff, crit is not damage increase. Crit is increasing damage potential, as in like you need to crit in order for you to have the increased damage, right? Because the crit increases your damage by 200%. So the higher the crit you have high damage expectancy.
반면에 신속으로 올릴 땐 뭐가 장점?
So for swiftness, as you guys also know, is it increases attack speed and cooldown. So the more swiftness you have, the faster the cooldown. You're just overall faster to cycle more skills within the given time.
옐로 게이지 채우기 위해서 데스레스를 한번 쓰고
He uses one death rattle to fill up the gauge.
갑자기 여기서부터 부족해요. 이거 있는데 못 써.
So for example, the concept of going high swiftness is, the thought process is, well, I'm going to, even if I crit less or if I have to do less damage, I'm just going to hit him twice. I'm just going to hit him 2 times or 3 times to cover up that damage. In return, I get to move faster and maneuver faster, and then I get to, piano more skills. So it's based on top of that. However, for Taijutsu Scrapper, since her spirit is fixed, right, and her spirit has a fixed gain, unless you lose like a conviction judgment rune, she tends to have another wall where she hits if you go like high swift. The reason why I talked about that is because, so if you go high swiftness and you lack spirit, why don't you just switch one more yellow skill to green skill to gain more yellow gauges, right? But to that point where we talked about the skill point, where we talked about, if you take roundup sweep instead of instant hit, you already lose DPS. So it's like a side grade instead of an upgrade. So additional advantage for high swiftness though is, as we explained before, since you're hitting twice as more, right? Since you're hitting twice as more, using more skills instead of critting, for stagger, as long as you hit them, you stagger more, right? You do consistent stagger. So you generally have higher stagger, not a burst stagger. Burst stagger and consistent staggers they're totally two different things. So if you're thinking about stagger, spamming a lot more skills, landing more hits, but seeing a little bit of more white number, you would try to focus on swiftness more. So also at the same time, if you go high swiftness and wear cooldown gems as well, since cooldown gems is multiplicative, right? You don't get that much of an efficiency off of the high swiftness, and you actually don't get the skill thing. Unlike the high crit combat stat one, the gems tend to be more efficient because the cooldown number is a little higher.
치명과 신속을 반반을.
Right. So also you can switch from, let's say, high crit to just a little bit more swiftness, or put a ring, or put 2 rings, or even a earring over to balance it out to your liking. So he's going to explain another reason why he prefers high crit. Ooh, Photoshop.
Hi Photoshop. Say hi to Photoshop. Say hi to everything. In nice. 이거는 이제 때리는 게 여기서 한번 때리고 이제 쿨타임이 길고.
Okay, so these over here is you hit them and then the cooldown, hit, cooldown, hit, cooldown, hit. Okay.
이제 좀 더 약하게 때리는 대신에 자주
With less
때리죠.
hits. Less hit. Less hit, but more hits. I mean, less damage, but more hits.
Yep.
So this is the cooldown. This is an empty frame. You guys know this as well. It's very simple. Right. So the scarecrows, when you go to a real raid, so you guys are getting ready for Valtan now, right? You go to the Valtan raid, right? There's going to be a situation where you just can't do damage because of a certain pattern. You have a cutscene and all these stuff.
이만큼의 이제 컷신 기간이 나왔다고 치면은 이만큼의 컷신, 그러니까 이만큼은 딜을 못하는 구간이에요. 보면은.
So considering you guys perfectly cycle every single skill, right? This blue bar is like a cutscene, is where nobody can do any damage. If you're not experienced in the game, you tend to miss that other bar, right? 그 다시 움직여줘봐. So if you tend to not be able to rotate the class, and rotate your skills enough, you lose these two opportunities, right? However, if you become more expert, if you know the raids like the behind your head, like for example, you know when Argos runs away for you guys, right? Because you guys are getting more experience. The more experience you get, the block time is moved over, so you actually lose only 100 damage. 다시 옮겨줘봐.
그러면은
Yep,
이런
so you
식으로
lose
내가
only
조절할 수
one
있구나.
skill. You can move around, you can maneuver around and cycle enough that you can actually squeeze in more DPS compared to like a high swiftness.
하이 스위프트는 내가 아무리 잘해도 이 한계가 있어요.
So for high swiftness, doesn't matter how well you like playing bad to playing perfect, it's still about the same because you just have such short cooldown. You just be punching it like everywhere, right? So high crit is becoming the more poorly you play, the less damage it is, obviously. But this is also the same theory for any other classes too. The classes that are consistent damage who hit a lot more, they tend to have lower ceiling. But classes who do like a big damage, big hits, but with longer cooldown, tend to have much higher ceiling if you can actually be expert enough to squeeze in as much as you can. For example, you guys see me or you guys see like Saint or Zeals or Benji doing the later raids like Broshaza, right? Broshaza has tons of cutscenes. It goes to the meteor. You have to go throw away the meteor too, right? And you have to do the mechanics, like so many mechanics, all these things. So if you are such an expert, you can actually know, okay, I'm gonna go throw the meteor away and then use my big skill and land my big skill, right? If you are swiftness, since your skills are ready most of the time, you can do consistent damage. And consistent damage classes, that one of the best classes is Gunslinger, because Gunslinger have a lot of skills to rotate and does decent damage outside, but it's generally lower compared to high DPS, high ceiling classes. Again, you guys are always talking about Surge versus RE, right? Same thing over here. Because let's say Surge is like 1, 2, 3, and 4, right? Imagine the cutscenes like in the middle like this. You miss big opportunities, right? But let's say you're RE, you're hitting so many more times. So this should be higher. Let's say Surge, you're so good at Surge to the point that you land every Surge at every point in opportunity, including your supports too. Support's not even included in here because supports give you buff as well. And when you get a buff from the support, your damage increases, right? So you need to be able to sync your DPS skills with your support. That also means it takes more skill. So if you go high crit, yep.
여기다가 붉은색으로다가
So
약간
red.
주황색이나 여기다 서포터 그거를 추가해보자. 알버트가 말한 것처럼 서포터는 훨씬 짧으니까.
So he's going to add the support section too.
이만큼이 버프가 들어오는 구간이라고 치면은
So if that's the timing where the buff comes in. So for supports, the frame is much shorter, right? So you can maybe land 2 skills in when the buff is on, but as long as you land 1 skill while the buff is active, you're just about the same.
뭐 요거 얘기는 사실 뭐 중요한 얘기긴 한데 쉬운 얘기니까.
It's a very simple concept, but it's very important. This is also why it's so hard to determine what class does more DPS because they operate so different. And it's very different, and also very different by class, different by raid, different by people, different by skills. That's why it's the number to number comparison doesn't really help much to determine which class is better because everyone plays differently.
그리고 이거는 뭐 마찬가지로 쇼크랑 타이즈추에도 적용이 된다.
And this is the same case for Taijutsu and Shock as well. So this would be Taijutsu and this would be Shock. The only difference. So when you guys say which is better, which is meta, and all that stuff, it's very simple. You just have different timings, different cycles, all this stuff. It's just that one has an advantage over the other and one has disadvantage over the other. So in the very end, when you guys get the end gates, end gears, like relics, you have bracelets, all this stuff, as the game progresses, you get to have more stats, you get to have more combat stats, you get to have more crit rates too. And there's also party synergy. If you have a Deadeye, or if you have a Gunslinger, if you have like Arcana, or a Lance Master, a Glaivier in your team, or Striker, they can increase the instant crit chance for a couple of seconds. So if that is the case, what the final form that would be that he prefers is he moves over either one ring or one earring over to swiftness to make it efficient. He wants to be as slow as he can, most efficient as he can in terms of pulling out the yellow numbers, and have just enough swiftness to cycle all of the skills without having too much issues.
Anyways, 그러면은
Okay.
특성까지도 얘기 끝난 것 같고 각인 얘기로 넘어가도 괜찮을까요?
Okay, so
안
since
얘기했네.
so this covers most of the combat stats, and let's go over the engravings now. So it's going to explain a general mindset of choosing engravings.
1번 첫 번째로 어떤 스크래퍼를
So
하고
number
싶냐?
one.
You want
number one.
tie or you want shock?
Hmm.
Let's get first. 그럼 일단 첫 번째로 채술부터 얘기를 할게요. 자, 채술.
So it's going to talk about taijutsu first.
I want taijutsu. 그러면은 무조건 첫 번째로는 채술이 들어가요. 왜냐면은 모든 각인 중에서 채술의 딜 증가량이 아마 제일 높을 거예요.
So number
채술로
one,
갈 때.
number one most important engraving, it says taijutsu, your class engraving. Afterwards, you choose a general universal engraving that almost every single class uses. That increases your damage the most.
원한. 이거 논란이 많지만 아무튼 20%를 올려줍니다.
Grudge.
제일 많이 올려줘요. 거의.
Yep. Increases 20%.
이제 그냥 플랫으로 올려주는 애들이
Flat.
저밭,
Curse doll.
그다음에 돌대,
Raid
Raid
captain.
captain.
There's also raid captain. Yeah.
그다음에 질량 증가 이건 영어로 뭐지?
Increase mass.
네, increase mass. 그러니까 공격 속도 감소가 인파이터한테 그렇게 크지는 않아요. 특히 채술한테는.
So taijutsu, the attack speed doesn't really hinder her performance. So it's
물론
like
이제
another option.
질증, 돌대, 저밭, 원한 이 정도가 이제 안정적으로 올려주는 플랫이고 그다음에 이제 플랫이긴 한데 트롤인 각인들
No, so it's a flat increase, but some of her trolls.
안상
Uh,
알죠?
yeah. Yep. You have the Master of Tenacity or Stabilized status. If you have both, you're a troll. Wait, you can't use one or the other.
Choose one. 워로드 같은 경우에는 얘를 실제로 쓰기도 하죠. 스카우터도 그렇고.
Scouters and Gunlancers use Stabilized status because their HP just never goes down.
쓰기도 하는데 인파이터한테는 이제 트롤 각인이다.
But it's a troll engraving for Scrappers.
그다음에 스킬 타입에 의해서 고를 수 있는 메이저 각인들을 보면은 all out attacks, and very supercharge. 슈퍼차지가 있는데 인파이터의 스킬 중에 홀딩 및 캐스팅 혹은 차지가 있긴 있는데 내 모든 데미지의 한 70% 80% 이상을 차지하거나 그러지 않기 때문에 얘네는 바로 고려 대상에서 제외. 이거는 충격 단련도 마찬가지. 좀 이따 설명 안
So
할게요.
taking away, so for all out attack and supercharge, you just don't use it because those engravings are viable only if about 70 to 90% of the skills are either charge or casting.
그러니까 얘네도 아까 말했듯이 치명은 그냥 플랫 데미지 인크리스가 아니라 데미지 기대값이 오르는 거예요. 계산을 해야 된단 말이에요.
Right. So you have theoretical DPS increases like Keen Blunt, Adrenaline, and Precision Dagger.
일단 정단은 치적을 굉장히 많이 늘려주는 것처럼 보이지만 저 깎는 치명타 피해 12%가 생각보다 커서 대부분의 그 구간에서
So as for Precision Dagger, it does give you a lot of crit rate, but because of the decreased crit damage, he feels that it doesn't give the flat percentage damage increase, because the easier way to calculate what the engraving is important or not is to convert them into damage percentage. For example, keen blunt, if you have 60% crit, the keen blunt engraving is basically 16% increase in damage. It's like a curse stall. If keen blunt is 70% crit rate, it will be about 18%, which is equivalent to increased mass, right? And if you have 80%, it will be 20%, which is equivalent to grudge. The precision dagger, if you convert that into damage percentage, it seems to be lower than most of the engraving, which is about 16%. Lower than 16%.
하지만 그래도 계산 때려봤을 때 대부분의 상황에서
So, as on top of that, so the efficiency of precision dagger could go up if you go with like full swiftness and then go for the precision dagger, just to increase the flat crit rate, and then you just hit more, right? So mathematically it could be okay, but at the same time, what if precision dagger is super cheap in your server, right? If it's super cheap, the price of an engraving is actually very important in your builds too, because the more money you save, you can actually do the raids properly, do the raids easier, and do the clears to get the gold back, right? So price of the engravings is also a huge account when you're choosing engravings.
돈 막 100만 골드씩 쓴 사람들보다는 약하겠지만
Right, for example, let's say you get like in the future when you guys have relic sets, right? Let's say you have 4 engravings by spending like, let's say 20k gold. If you spend the same 20k gold, be able to have another engraving, which is precision dagger, and then you adjust the combat sets a little bit, that tends to be a little bit more better in overall DPS, right? So you can think about that as an option, not like there's no right or wrong answer. It's about calculating. It's about what you can actually achieve and what does the market look like, and then you build it accordingly. I think that's the fun part about all the MMOs, honestly.
그다음에 이제 아드레날린이랑 긴 블런트는 유명하죠.
So adrenaline keen blunt is a very popular engraving, as you know. All my interviewers say the same thing. They're like a combination. They're like a synergy engraving. Those two work together so well.
그래서 크게 설명하진 않겠습니다.
But he's not gonna explain it in a detail because you guys hear it all the time.
데미지 타입 인파이터는 백어택이죠.
The damage type engravings.
보통 이제 기습의 대가 결태대 마스터 오브 앰부시 이거 마스터 오브 브롤링
And you have
그다음에
hitmaster.
히트마스터 이게 있는데
Yeah.
하대는 못 써요. 다 스킬들이 백어택 아니면 헤드어택이라서
So
히트마스터가
you can't
적용되는
use
스킬이
hitmaster.
하나도 없습니다.
Scrapper has no skills that has an omnidirectional skill. Awakening is omnidirectional, but it doesn't apply to awakenings.
거기 자기가 플레이하는 서버랑 한국 서버랑 좀 다를 거예요. 왜냐면 이건 최근에 패치가 된 이유니까. 헤드어택 스킬이 하나밖에 없습니다.
Right, and for Master of Combat, there's only one head attack skill.
그래서 기습의 대가
Now you're left with Master of Ambush.
타격의 대가 같은 경우에는 16% 각인.
So unlike the Hitmaster, where it increases flat 15% damage, Master of Ambush and Master of Combat, you have to be successful in landing your back attack, or it's not going to be applied. The damage increase is not going to be applied.
오케이. 결투의 대가에도 똑같이 제공되는 얘기인데 이거를 그러니까 기습의 대가를 내가 고려할 때 실제로 그러니까 이거는 되게 리스크가 큰 각일이에요 사실.
So explaining about Ambush Master, the 25% does look very good. However, this 25% damage increase is 0 if you don't land your back attack. So if all of your 8 skills are back attack, and if you actually miss 4 of the skills, or 2 of the skills as you said, this 25% increase is basically would be a 20% increase because you missed 2 of the skills with a 6. With that being said, it does look like a very good engraving, but if you can't land your back attack, it actually doesn't do anything for you.
그러면은 내가 백어택을 하는데 내가 얘 백에 있을 때만 열심히 치고 그리고 얘가 고개를 돌렸어요. 턴어라운드. 그러면은 내가 여기 가서 백어택 치고 그럼 얘가 또 고개를 돌렸어. 근데 여기 가서 또 백어택 치고 이러면 되지 않느냐? 그럼 25% 아니냐? 그것도 아니에요. 왜냐면은
Let's say you're attacking from the back a little bit. Like this. Yep. You're attacking from the back. And then the boss turns his head around. So you walk around and then you hit him again. Right? And then the boss turns his head around again. So you walk around and you hit him again. If people will think like, oh, why don't you just do it this way? That's still 25% damage increase, right? But you have to put in an account that you walk over there too. Like you walk over there too as well. And then sometimes if you go walk all the way 180 degrees, some other class can just cast one more skill. So it's pretty hard to calculate the actual damage decreased within that specific situation, but you have to put that into an account as well.
물론 이거는 결투의 대가에도 똑같이 적용되는 얘기입니다. 인파이턴 쓰지 않지만.
Yep, this is the same case for Master of Combat, which gun lancers use as well, the red gun lancers.
각성. 그러니까 이거는 비주류거든요. 딜러 각인 중에서는.
Yep.
보통 이제 기술의 대가도 그렇고 각성기에 적용되지 않는 각인들이 많은데다가 타대도 그렇고 결대도 그렇고 각성기에 적용되지 않는 각인들이 좀 있는데다가 실제로 각성기의 딜 비중이 그렇게 크지를 못해요.
Right. So for Awakening, so you know there's a less popular engraving we're going over, which is Awakening and Lightning Fury. So for Awakening, it does increase the number of awakenings you can use, and it decreases the percentage by 50%. However, the other engravings does not apply to your Awakening. For example, the something like Hitmaster or Ambushmaster, some of the majority of the engravings does not apply on Awakening anyway. And then since Awakening is one of those things that you don't focus your DPS on, it tends to be a little bit less popular engraving.
지금 한 4줄? 그러니까 아르고스 저거 그냥 싸게 돌고 있는.
In the beginning, when you guys are fighting Argos or even weaker bosses, Awakening tends to be a little bit better because the reason why is your skill levels are lower, your gem levels are lower, your engravings are lower too. So Awakening tends to take a little bigger pie. So getting Awakening seems to be pretty good because it does a lot of damage, right? But as the game progresses, you get higher level gems, you get more engravings, etc. Your skill set's damage overall increases, but your Awakening stays about the same. So the efficiency kind of drops.
원분도 약간 마찬가지로 볼 수 있는데 일단 요거는 번개의 분노 어디서 적용했지? 이런 식으로 번개의 분노 구체가 뭐예요? 돌고 있는 거 보이죠? 하나,
Just about Lightning Fury.
2개, 3개,
3,
4개,
4.
그리고 방금 터졌어요 방금 5개 모여서. 근데 이것도 이제 얘랑 각성이랑 비슷한 이유로 이거
Yeah,
같은
so
경우에는
same case. Same case for Lightning Fury as well. In the beginning, it does seems to be a little good because you do less damage overall. So the engraving itself, in flat damage, it tends to be helping a lot more.
그러면 번개의 분노의 파이가 그만큼 작아지고 얘는
Right.
쓸모가 없어져요.
Yep, same thing for DPS pies. As a game progresses further, your skill sets are going to be at least 1.5 or 2 times more damage, right? So your Lightning Fury's DPS pie is going to decrease, so losing efficiency overall.
이런 거 같은 경우에는 이제 스크래퍼만 설명하는
Yep, and this is very this applies to everyone as well. So if you actually go to Trickshin and test out switch one engraving on and off and see how much overall DPS you actually generate, right? And if it's about the same, and if it costs really cheap, well, why not? Because in the end you will do the same thing, but you will need to switch it again later. But the more important part is just testing it out.
자, for 타이 스크래퍼 원래 이걸로 시작했죠. 내가 타이 스크래퍼를 하고 싶으면은 채수를 고르고 많이 올려주는 거 원한 고르고.
Number 1 and Grudge.
다음에 아드의 둔 이거 어디 갔냐 아드레날린. 아드의 둔 그냥 골라버리고.
Keen, Blunt, and Adrenaline.
4개죠 벌써.
It's already 4.
그 다음에 플랫 데미지 하나 그냥 골라서 올리시면 되거든요. 나머지 하나는
And after it's just flat damage.
컬스도
Either
올린다거나.
Curse Doll or
활성도
Ambush
이렇게.
Master.
아까 말했던 질량 증가를 넣는다거나 이건 많이 쓰는 사람은 없어요. 그래도 인기 있는 가게는 아니라서 딜은 많이 올려주지만
Some people do use it, but it's not super popular.
요걸 쓴다거나 요걸 쓴다거나 그다음에 마스터 앰부시 이것도 들어가야죠. 세니까
Master
생각해보니까
Ambush
그러네.
works too.
거의 이걸로 끝이긴 하네. 뭐 97도를 깎았다거나 고대학세로 넘어간다거나 해서 아드레날린을 1로 내리고.
Yep. So that's when you have like a 9-7 or something. But you guys notice, you know, Keen, Blunt, and Adrenaline is really good because you go high crit anyway, right? So it's very efficient. Based on efficiency, you go Class Engraving, Grudge, Keen, Blunt, Adrenaline, and then you choose either one of the flat increase engravings like a Increased Mass or Curse Doll or even Ambush Master if you're confident on landing all your back attacks.
하이 스위프트니스를 하고 싶다.
If you're playing High Swiftness,
그 렐릭 기어 셋이 다 나와야 돼요. 갈망이 나와야 돼요.
Right. You need all the relic gear sets too.
그럼 돌 때 넣을 수 있어요.
Oh, you can add raid captain if you go high swiftness with the yearning set on the support.
그 다음에 나는 잘한다. 그러니까 기습 넣어놓고.
And since you're faster, you may be easier to land back attacks as well. So since your crit rate is super low, by going high swiftness, you add adrenaline at the very end.
뭐 아까 말했던 그 엄청 싼 정단 넣어도 되고.
Or you can also add precision dagger too.
하면 얘도 아까처럼 뭐 97돌 깎는다거나 하면은 어디 갔어? 그리고 얘는 진짜로 신속 높아서 이거 진짜로 그거거든요.
And since you're high
타겟
swiftness, since you go high swiftness, increased mass is also a choice because if you think about it, you go high swiftness and your attack speed is like off the roof, so why not use it?
그래서 뭐 이런 식으로 97돌 깎으면 마지막에 엔드 게임 세팅이 될
So
수도 있고.
yeah, so that would be like the thought process. Now, if you go over to shock scrapper, it's the same thing. Number one is a class engraving.
충격 단련은 보면은 내 충격 스킬들의 데미지를 20% 늘려줘요. 원한도 20% 늘려준단 말이에요. 그래서 사실 이거 두 개만 비교하면 원한이 더 좋긴 해요. 뭐 이런 게 있다는 것 정도만 알아두고 저는 무조건 충단 3으로 일단은 레커멘드를 할게요.
So there is an off meta like build where you go level 1 shock training because they're literally the same thing. For level 3, shock training is 20% and grudge is also 20%, right? So if you're actually going for just a level 1, it's also an option because it increases 10% by just having it as level 1. But he recommends level 3 because it also has that shock regen rate as well, which is 4% instead of 2. Well, he's thinking of researching it because there's also like percentage wise it does make sense as long as the recovery of the green gauge is okay. So for the 3 engravings that he recommends for, let's say you guys go to Valtan, it would be, if you're really good, if you think you're a good player, you're going to hit all the back attacks, you go grudge, shock training, and master of ambush. If you're afraid of the ambush master, you would go shock training, grudge, and then adrenaline for some of that crit.
그러니까 좀 가격 문제로 나는 다른 각인을 쓸 수 있을 것 같다. 이러면은 세 줄에서는 사실 쓸 거 많죠. 아까 말했던 거 다 쓰면 되니까. 얘도는 아직은 침적이 낮아가지고 좀 힘들고. 뭐 저주받은 인형을 쓴다거나 커스돌 쓴다거나.
works.
그다음에 이건 좀 그러니까 저는 괜찮았는데.
So increased mass is an option, but you're going to be slow, like very slow. Foss said it was okay for him, but he is actually really experienced in the game, so it's a little bit different perspective.
이런 식으로 넣는다고 딱 치고.
So if you're using 4, it would be adding another flat damage engraving, or you can add Master of Ambush.
뭐 이거죠.
So if you go 5, yep. Adrenaline keen blunt combo is just so good in this game.
이렇게 들어가도 상관이 없고 아드 예둔 원한 중단 기습 이렇게 들어가도 상관없고. 그러니까
That's what most people do. Yep.
한 요거 정도에서 고르면 될 것 같아요. 여기가 굉장히 비주류고 요거 6개 중에서 5개 자기 원하는 거 고르면 될 것 같다. 충단 필수 원하는 뭐 끼기 싫으면 나머지 끼면 되니까.
So out of the 6 engravings, you just choose 5 or 4 or 3 of them. We didn't talk about spirit absorption, which is a good question.
그거는 일단 채술 쪽에서도 정읍 얘기하려다가 안 적어놔가지고 까먹었는데 정읍 얘기 안 한 이유는 저는 정읍이 구리다고 생각해서 그런 거고. 근데
So for Tai, the reason why he didn't talk about spirit absorption for Tai is because he thinks that spirit absorption is bad. It's a bad engraving for Taijutsu because you're already faster, right?
각인 한 줄을 이런 똥각인으로 채워도 남들보다 그렇게 막 크게 약하진 않아요.
So Shock Scrapper does a lot of damage, period, of her kid. It's not number 1. Since it does high damage already, she can actually take away one of the damage engraving and then convert it into utility engraving. Spirit Absorption is a utility engraving. It is not a damage engraving. It increases your movement speed and attack speed. It has nothing to do with your numbers, right? So since Shock Scrapper is a burst and does enough high ceiling damage, what people sometimes do is they remove one damage engraving and put it on utility so that they have an easier time landing their skills and playing in more comfort. And it doesn't jeopardize your DPS, overall DPS compared to other classes.
개인적인 견해고 실제로 전기 흡수를 꼈을 때 그렇게까지 나쁘냐? 큰 도움이 되기
So
때문에.
as I explained a little bit in addition to that, if you use Spirit Absorption with Ambush Master, if you have Ambush Master and Spirit Absorption together, ability to land back attack becomes so much easier because you just move so much faster.
씨발 로스타크의 프로 게이머고 나는 그 모든 골드를 아껴가지고 내 캐릭터를 어떻게든 효율적으로 올려야겠고 응? 그런 사람이잖아. 나는 그라인딩 하는 사람이다. 미친 사람이다. I'm a crazy person. 그러면은 경기 보수는 절대 never 고려하면 안 돼요. 그래서 제가 이걸 싫어하는 거고요.
So
That's what I'm doing.
if you are thinking that you're a pro Lostark player, you grind the shit out of it, you have the most efficiency, big damage, raid, first clear, etc. You should never think of going Spirit Absorption.
왜냐면은 아무리 처음 보는 레이드라도 이거 없이 가가지고 연습하고 하면은 결국에 다 할 수 있거든요. 백어택 맞추고 다 피하고 할 수 있어.
Right. So eventually, if you beat Valtan like 50 times, you know where he's going to face every pattern. So Spirit Absorption is not going to be needed when you are super experienced in the game eventually, right? So by not having Spirit Absorption, you can just squeeze in more DPS and you do more DPS and then get that MVPs and stuff, right? So for those type of players, since you're super confident on your skills and then you just gotta be very competitive. I mean, there are multiple type of gamers, right? So in that case, Spirit Absorption should not be in your category. However, if you're an enjoyer, like you know enjoy playing the game slowly, you want to learn slowly, you want to try the new raids, and then you want to make sure that you don't die as much. You want to be helpful to your team. A little bit casual, right? You should take Spirit Absorption to make your gameplay a little easier so that you have a little less stressful time because it's going to be stressful if you're slower.
저는 개인적인 의견으로 추천하진 않는다.
So
하고 싶으면 써라.
so another thing is Lost Ark is not a game where you have a very tight DPS checks. You have an option to utilize utility engraving, and then you're not gonna have that much of a problem. You're not gonna lack DPS. But for someone who is comfortable without it, I mean, there's no reason to put it in there to make the game easier, right? So for those of you who want to squeeze in as much damage as you can, everyone has different preferences, so you would just use it accordingly.
저는 정말 이 개인적인 견해로 정겹선은 딜각인이 아니기 때문에 유틸 각인이기 때문에 나는 안 쓰겠다. 그렇다고 뭐 남들까지 안 쓰게 만들겠다 이런 정도까지는 아니거든.
This has been a fight in Korea community, right? And I also know this about it too. Either Spirit Absorption is a damage engraving or not. The funny thing is, Spirit Absorption is not a damage engraving. It's a utility engraving. People are fighting at the wrong cause here. However, since it's not a damage engraving, using it is totally fine. Like, for example, as Fast says, he's not going to make people switch from Spirit Absorption. Let's say you guys use Spirit Absorption. They're not going to say, oh, you should switch that into like a damage engraving, right? You should never recommend it that way. Like, it's fine of using it. If you think it's a fun engraving, use it. A different case is where if you go 3-3-3-3 and one of them is a Spirit Absorption, and if you're complaining that you're not getting MVP, if you're complaining that you're not doing enough damage, compared to the guy that uses 4 damage engraving, you need to take away Spirit Absorption. So there are that kind of guys in the community too, in the Korean side, where like, how come I'm not doing enough damage? Well, that's because you have a Spirit Absorption.
Why?
Just think of it that way.
Spirit Absorption is damage engraving. Why?
Yeah, that's the argument those kind of guys were doing. But it makes no sense. In a percentage wise, it's movement and attack speed. That has nothing to do with your DPS.
Yeah. Help a little bit DPS, but not DPS engraving.
Yeah, it's not DPS engraving.
깰레이드 못 깨는 것도 아니고 그냥 안 죽는 게 다니까. 알버트 항상 말하잖아요. 안 죽는 게 최고다.
So in my case, when I talk to you guys about this, I always say I don't care about DPS, just don't die. And I will be someone that would just recommend Spirit Absorption because I'd rather have you guys not die and be more comfortable at the game and not get stressed. And moving faster tends to be more enjoyable. And as you guys may know, if whoever used Spirit Absorption, you guys may see yourself like, oh, I'm moving so fast, it's so enjoyable kind of thing, right? So
I'm not so fast.
okay, so that covers the engravings as well. We talked a lot, guys. Now now let's go for the last category, which it's a tradition on my interview channels, is soloing the monk. 땅랩으로 간다고?
Yeah, 1540.
Wow, on item level 2. That's pretty tough. That's
Yeah.
pretty tough.
With this card, full max light of salvation.
Yeah.
No gems.
You gonna try monk with no gems and just card set?
Yep.
Wow. Oh. Absolutely mad. He's a madman.
이러다 죽어야 재밌지.
Oh, okay. But if he dies, it's more fun though.
Think about it. Oh, I can beat it with no pot, no gems, and die.
Yeah, imagine you die. It's more
Yeah.
funnier.
Imagine that.
On item level, the monk.
I'm lagging.
You're lagging already?
Yep. Turn around, wait. Kicking. Ah, I can't back attack in this situation. I cannot. I mean,
Oh,
lagging.
the lag! Oh, the lag!
Oh! Never hit.
Oh!
Never hit though.
Wait, he's using hacks?
Yep. 그다음에 이렇게 구석에 있으면은 백어택 치기가 좀 어려워요.
Ah. So
사라지면은
he's
여기로
saying
나올
it's
테니까.
harder to do. He's saying he's hard to do back attacks if he's in a corner like this. Nice. Going for that back attacks. That counter though? Ooh. Clean.
Oh,
Oh,
I'm
lag!
lagging!
Oh,
No!
lag! The lag!
Ah, no destruction. Oh,
No destruction! Got some lag.
but never hit.
Dude, he didn't get hit once yet. Oh, lag! Oh,
No, I'm hit. No, where's
oh!
counter? Ah,
Oh! Why? What's with the lag?
nice. Nice destruction. I don't know. 아, 나 알았다. 이거 씨. 그 아까 캠 화면 그거 송출한다고 OBS 켜놨거든요.
Oh, cause he turned OBS on. Someone's keep following him. That's why he's
No.
lagging.
No, I'm not streamer. Don't
He's
follow
not
me.
streamer. Don't follow me.
You press that button, me lagging. No.
Oh, everyone's keep pressing
No,
follow
no.
and lagging him.
You guys want to see me die?
Yes.
Never. Dong dong. Jump. Landing here. Back attack is here.
Ooh, clean.
Oh, I'm lagging. I can't.
Oh,
nice.
the lag. Oh, the counter though.
Who's keep pressing follow button? No, don't do that. Guys, too mean to me.
actually, I didn't expect him to
I'm dying.
be this. Oh, one death. Boom.
Cause I'm lagging.
It lagged.
Someone look at this.
Bro.
Someone keep pressing follow. Oh my god. Jumping here. No, I'm.
Guys, this is legit one hit.
And lose half.
9,743 HP left. He can breathe on him and die. Oh, the awakening though. Do it for YouTube, bro.
Do it.
Do it. Do it, Scrapper.
No, no. Where are you going?
Oh. Oh, nice. Back attack opportunity. Whoa! Wow! Wow, on item level, no gems, just card set though.
안 되겠다. 영상에 하나 더 넣었죠.
Oh, so he's gonna go to his main now.
보석도 넣고.
And he's gonna put gems. See. Monk round 2, revenge. What? No. He's taking Atrophin. No pots Atrophin. More Atrophin. Your HP is half from the Atrophin. He didn't even get a hit, and he's already half HP. Taking the drugs.
No. One hit.
One hit. Oh, nice dashes. Ooh! Big deeps. Ooh, wow. Look how clean that is. Oh, oh, there we go. Boom. And destruction. Boom, 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 boom. Oh!
Cut the scene, please. I made only one mistake. What the
I mean,
fuck?
that's pretty. It's pretty. It's pretty good.
Yeah, I'm not the expert guy.
Looks pretty expert to me.
He's looking me.
Wow! Punch in the face. That was our traditional monk solo for all the interviews that we have done. Now, yeah, let's wrap up after like a couple of questions, guys.
Q&A.
Let's see. Instant hit cooldown is a gem skill.
그게 당연히 이제 상황에 따라서 다른데 레이드에서 카운터가 필요한 상황이고 예를 들어
Again, that's more of a situational thing, because if you happen to have to counter very soon, you will just save the counter. I mean, it's a very straightforward answer, because like if you see, like, let's say your support's hitting all the counters, you don't have to worry about countering, so you just like use that as DPS. What would you say good crit rate for shock scrapper?
계산상으로 센 거 그런 거보다 실전에서 내가 스킬 놀리지 않고 잘 쓸 수 있으면서 데미지 기대값 어느 정도 뽑아낼 수 있는 게 저는 딱 이 정도라 생각해요. 그냥 지금 충단으로 65치면 백어택 빼고 잠깐만요. 백어택 포함이면은 치명 스탯 500일 때
So as you said, it's always the dependent, because like if you want more crit, you should convert more spec stats into crit if you want to. Right. So as he was saying, you can also, so with the ambush master and hidden the back attack with the entropy set, right? It's good for high ceiling DPS and a lot of damage, right? You can also go hallucination or in the other set, and then utilize engravings that is not ambush master and go something like a flat damage engraving. So people go do that in one reason, they want to play more comfortably, so there won't be any issues you going for like an omnidirectional scrapper, but you will definitely do a little less damage compared to the traditional back attack scrappers, because obviously mathematically you just do more damage, just keep landing more back attacks, right? So when you say you guys want to do hallucination or any of the other combination that doesn't utilize back attack, it is not like, it's viable. In the end, it's viable. Best skin for scrapper?
I think 내가 그거 보고 지금 찾고 있었는데 이거 괜찮은 것 같은데 반스?
He said he likes the panties.
Yep.
Yes. Wait, what skin is that?
스타킹 봐.
Stocking. Oh my god.
Why are you laughing like that?
The
I don't know.
thirst. No excuse. Okay. So best scrapper skin. He has a lot of skins. Look at that. Wow. He has a full tab worth of skins. Look at this. The real enjoyer right here. Wow. What is this?
디아블로.
It's Diablo.
그 다음에 이거는 올드 스토프인데 아마 지금 팔고 있을 건데 상점에서 후드
Old stuff.
멋있는 거.
Oh, the hood. Hey, that's nice. So he recommends the 30-year. Well, you guys don't have it yet, but that's just a glove right there. That's just a glove. So it removes the huge clunky weapons.
What the fuck is this? Yeah, are you crazy, Lostark? Is this a weapon? I think it's not.
So that covers the scrapper interview. Guys, so say thanks Foss for spending his time doing the research and tell you guys some good information. If we were missing something, we can always have another time adding into different things. He always hangs out on the static group as well. So this covers the interview, guys. So Thanks again, dudes. Foss, anything last thing to say? 마지막으로 얘기할 거?
Always. Thank you all guys and be nice.
Be nice. Okay.
Like me.
Like you? Okay. Be nice. Be nice like you.
But I'm not the be nice to Lost Boy.
Okay, not nice to Lust Boy.
인터뷰 너무 오래 끌었어.
Because the interview is so long. Lust Boy is very angry.
I'm sorry.
No, it's all good. Alright, cool. Then I'll see you guys later, guys. Bye.
Bye.
Say bye.